My name is Robert Fantina. I want to advise everybody that this webinar is being recorded. First, let me say that we acknowledge that we are living and working on the traditional territory of the Aduanadaran, also known as the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We are situated on the Halamand Tract, the land promised to the Six Nations that includes 16 kilometers on each side of the Grand River. Today's webinar is sponsored by Canadians for Palestinian Rights. CVPR is a nonpartisan community group based in Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario. It aims to create awareness of the effects of the military occupation on Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, the lack of equality for Palestinians living in Israel, and the enduring statelessness of Palestinian refugees in exile. We support justice and equality for all within the frameworks of human rights, international humanitarian law, and UN resolutions. Through its advocacy and educational activities, the group denounces all barriers and oppression created by racism, discrimination, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and colonialism. We are grateful for all those who have donated to CVPR so we can continue to have these important and informative webinars. Without your help, we cannot continue our constant efforts to promote justice with these forums. I'd like now for the board members to just briefly introduce themselves. Kathy?
I'm Kathy Bergen. I live in Kitchener-Waterloo.
Maisa?
Maisa Al-Mustafa. I also live in Kitchener-Waterloo.
Mamoon?
Mamoon Yanis. I lived in Kitchener-Waterloo too.
And as I mentioned, I'm Robert Fantina, and I live in Kitchener-Waterloo. We'd ask everybody to mute their microphones and turn their cameras off. Our speaker will present for 40 to 45 minutes. During that time, you're all invited to submit questions in the chat box, and we will receive them and ask them after the presentation. We'll have about 30 to 40 minutes for doing so. I will now turn the time over to Kathy to introduce our speaker.
Thank you. I would like to briefly introduce Haneen. I know all of you have received, the short bio, but I will still talk a little bit about her. Haneen Zoabi is a Palestinian political activist, a member of the National Democratic Assembly, a political party that was established in 1995 to counteract the negative impacts of the Oslo Accords, which only served to repress the struggle of Palestinian liberation. She was the first Palestinian woman representing a Palestinian party in the Israeli Knesset from 2009 to 2019. In 2010, Haneen joined the Gaza Freedom Flotilla, the Mavi Marmara, which I think some of you might know that Canada has a boat to Gaza as well. I'm not sure if David Heap will be on here today, but he is the person that that is coordinating that in Canada, the boat to Gaza, and it has been there. The Mavi Marmara came to Gaza in order to break the international silence of the Israeli inhumane siege on Gaza, which was imposed in 2007. Haneen has a master and MA in psychology and philosophy from Haifa University. She is a Palestinian who lives in Nazareth. She is one of the Palestinians that remained in 1948 during the Nakba. She and her family remained in Nazareth, and she has been living in Nazareth all her life. So we're very happy to have you, Haneen. Welcome here. I just also wanted to say that when I was living in Ramallah and I was watching the boat to Gaza, I remember hour by hour watching what was happening to you and others on the boat. It was a very, very difficult time. So, so maybe at some point you could talk about that a little bit too. But today she will speak about freedom for Palestine, a liberation, or a state. Welcome, Haneen. We are so happy and so pleased to have you.
شكرا Katie. شكرا. I'm happy to be with you. I want to thank the Canadian Voices for Palestinian Rights. Thank Katie, Bob, Maisa, Ma'moon, and all of you for this opportunity. Okay, I will talk for 45 minutes. I hope I will say everything I want to say. Now, we are meeting today. We can describe this moment or this period of time for the Palestinian cause struggle as confusing. Also, this confusion carry a hope, hopes which is not so clear, but this is a moment, if I want to describe the Palestinian moment, is confusion and hope, but we have witnessed, I would describe it, the last 6 till 10 years, turning the Palestinian cause from a political cause to a diplomatic cause and to a humanitarian cause. We were not defeated, although we have a sense of defeat, and we have all the objective reasons, besides the hope, to feel that we are in a difficult time before May 2021, and before the Negev, what's happening in Naqab last week. But if I'm just in a minute, the problem of the Palestinian cause that Israel has managed, and the PA, the traditional political performance, has managed to depoliticize the issue, to depoliticize the struggle, to depoliticize our conflict. So we was out of history. If you ask me my personal feeling, after leaving, not after leaving the Knesset, after the passing of Israel, the law, Israel as a nation, as a Jewish nation state law, I felt that we didn't react in a political way to this colonial law, to this honest moment, which Israel declared itself as a colonial project. This was our strategic moment as a Palestinian to say, we are not facing discrimination, we are not facing occupation, we are facing a colonial regime, a colonial entity. There is no way to challenge this colonialism beside suggesting our liberation project. This didn't happen. But during this feeling of frustration, which I personally felt, and I think I represent objective situation, that Israel is going more violent, is going more honest in its colonial dimension. She is not afraid from the Palestinian reaction. There is no active Palestinian resistance. There is no clear Palestinian vision. There is the PA is coordinating with Israel. Inside the 48, we become just a matter, our politics become a matter of a political representation inside the Knesset without this dimension of liberation. All of a sudden, what happened in May 2021 is the emergence of a new paradigm. It is not totally new. After the deal of the century / Israel as a nation state law, a new way of thinking, a new Palestinian way of imagination started to develop itself. The new paradigm, which now didn't replace the old paradigm of divided Palestinian communities, one in 48, one in Gaza. Each Palestinian community has its own interest, has its own struggle. We in 48 is struggling against discrimination, for a democracy within Israel. This is the old paradigm. We have accepted. It is not we as Palestinians. It is we as the political elite. It is we as the traditional political elite, PA, and even the parties inside the Knesset, even my party. And I will explain. Even the tension, and not the tension, the conflict between the political vision I represented and the new leadership of National Democratic Assembly after the joint list in 2015, after all the Palestinian political parties has united within one list entering the Knesset election and the Knesset. So May 2021 represented a historical moment in which it was clear that the Palestinian is divided, and this is a good division, it's a good confrontation and struggle. The Palestinians are divided between two paradigms. The old paradigm that we want a state in 1967, the Palestinians inside Israel as an internal Israeli issue. They are not politically, not emotionally. Okay, emotionally we are Palestinians, emotionally we are part of the Palestinian people, but what is the political meaning of this? Does this emotion and this identity connection freezes much? My connection?
Okay, I think if I could, Haneen, if I could interrupt just for a minute and ask everyone who has their camera on to please turn it off, because I think that will help the connection. No, not you, Haneen, everybody else. You keep yours on, but everybody else, it'll help the connection, I think, if fewer cameras are on. So I see some people still have their cameras on, please turn them off. I'm sorry to interrupt, Haneen, but I want to have the best possible connection. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So if you want now to analyze the political scene, the Palestinian political scene, we have a new generation, especially a new generation represent a new old paradigm that the Palestinian issue is an issue of liberation against colonialism. It is not the issue of a state. It is not an issue of separated Palestinian community. That community has its own struggle. And this was an Israeli, this would be the Israeli success to divide us as a cause. So the critical Palestinian thinking now, after it turns to be so obvious, the death of the two-state paradigm, the death of having the Palestinians within Israel having a democracy here and becoming equal citizens, this parallel to how Israel becomes so clear in its colonialist project, Israel in its laws, the Jewish a state for the Jewish nation has declared it so clearly that there is no place to other people. Here on the land there is one people, the Israelis. This is our land. The Article 1 in this law is talking about the land of Israel, not the state of Israel. It is the first law, Israeli law, which doesn't talk about the state. It's talk about the land. It's talk about the Zionist ethos, the Zionist project. And it was so clear that there is no place to other people, no rights, no recognition whatsoever. The Israelis even didn't differentiate between the Palestinians citizens and the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. This law this as one Palestinian entity, which is good, which is right. But after this, it is the moment of the defeat of the paradigm of two-state. But this is just the social career of the new paradigm, which is opposite to the two-state paradigm and to divided community, was that Palestinian is the struggle of the Palestinians is for liberation. We cannot act as separated community. We are one people. We are facing a colonialist project, but this is the imagination. This is the power till now of the imagination. The social career of this imagination, new paradigm, are a new generation and old marginalized political Palestinian elites. I would consider myself one of this. I would consider myself, okay, no problem. So now the Palestinian, what is the Palestinian? It didn't experience before the last 2 years such a schizophrenia. A social part of the Palestinians, still the elite, the old traditional elite, still believe in the two-state solution, and a new generation emerges, entering the scene with a new imagination. Okay. Now, what the potential of this moment is great. So what's the power of this moment? The power of this moment that it is clear for part of us in 48 that while we were trying to struggle against the racist definition of the state, using the contradiction of the state, the definition of the state as a Jewish and as a democratic, we played within this contradiction in order to say that we are not facing a natural state. We are not facing a normal. We are not facing a normal state. This is my party, for example. We are facing not a problem of discrimination. The problem is in the DNA of Israel as a Jewish state. And this is why we were represented in the Knesset in order to say that we need to decolonize the state. And our decolonization as citizens in Israel will be part of the national macro decolonization project of our people. The historical moment of the law of Israel as a state for the Jewish people has given us a golden opportunity to say that now our representation in the Knesset, even our traditional tools of struggle, even within the Knesset, is meaningless. It's meaningless because Israel didn't even care to represent itself as a democracy. We cannot even use this tension between Israel as a democratic state and Israel as a Jewish state. We couldn't even control after June 2018 to use this tension between the Jewish side, which means Zionist side of Israel, and the pretenders of Israel of being democracy. So we ought, in 2008, already 4 years ago, to think in a different way, as I am talking about the traditional parties which are represented in the Knesset. The strategic moment in 2018, 1 year before the deal of the century, or 6 months before the deal of the century, to say, okay, there is no way for us as Palestinians, unless to say that this is a colonial state. There is no democracy, there is no way of normal life unless we decolonize the state, redefine the citizenship, and that the Israeli citizenship is a colonialist citizenship, and we cannot do so without being again unified with the other section of the Palestinians. We cannot struggle as citizens inside Israel. We are not an internal Israeli issue. We are part of the Palestinian issue. We didn't say that 2018, but the new generation, 3 years after that, May 2021, something happened. This imagination of people like me that something is wrong, the PA is coordinating with the Israelis. The PA now is part of the Zionist project. She is cooperating with that. There is no leadership which represent the people. The delegitimation of the leadership has developed a new social political activist, but they are without a leadership. They lack an organization, they lack a leadership, and we are fragmented. But the positiveness of this period, the loss of the legitimacy of the Palestinian leadership, this is positive for me. To say that on the street, there is no legitimacy for the PA, that even the traditional political parties within 48 has lost their legitimacy because they didn't represent any challenge to Israel as a colonialist system. We are just continuing our classical, even we don't, my party stopped to represent this challenge of Israel as a Jewish state, to say it is a justice, we need a state for all the citizens. And a state for all the citizens, not just within 48, state for all the citizens, from the Jordan River, from the river to the sea. We didn't say this. Because of this, we had lost our legitimacy on the street. This means that the street now is ahead of the traditional political elite, the traditional organization. And this is something good. The new paradigm, which is in a sharp contrast with the old paradigm, 2 states, the division of communities, the new paradigm didn't replace the old one. Also is dead in terms of legitimacy. The old paradigm is dead in terms of legitimacy, but it didn't lose its power on the ground. It still has its power on the ground. And this is what is confusing. This is why I describe the moment as confusing, because those who are holding the right paradigm, the liberation paradigm, the united people, the Palestinians as a unity, with a vision of liberation, with a vision of deconstructing Zionism, they lack a concrete definition of what we mean by liberation, what we mean by deconstructing. You will see the new discourse, the emerging of this new discourse, but without specific definitions and without a very clear vision of what we are meaning by, or what we mean by liberation, what we mean by deconstructing. Because of this, we are not, I cannot describe this period as a period of reformulating our national project. We are in a process of reformulating our national process. And we are in a process because we are ending 10 years of depoliticization, 10 years that Oslo, 20 years, but the last 10 years were so violent that it killed the Palestinian imagination. It killed the Palestinian sense that we are a struggle, we represent a struggle for liberation. Now with this new discourse, and I don't want to sound naive or optimistic without justification. As open, you would see, you can feel it within the discourse of those who are not part of the traditional political elite, who are either on the margins of the political parties inside 48, or the very powerful criticism of the PA on the West Bank and on Gaza, and on the new generation, which is acting in a unifying way. There is now a great youth activism with more, with bigger role of the diaspora. The diaspora now is taking a place within this scene. The Palestinians, the new discourse is treating the Palestinian cause as part of the international discourse of justice. Now, this reformulating our cause as our struggle as a struggle of justice, it has been carried by a youth which also globalize, or which also are so aware of the international dimension of justice, and they treat the Palestinian cause as and the Palestinian justice as part of this international justice. Also, we can realize that the linkage that the youth generation is making more between liberation and personal freedom. So it is also a more a liberal discourse of liberation, which is related to personal freedom. Issues of women freedom, women equality, and personal equality. Okay, now what's the strength the strength of the Palestinian issue, and I will then go to the weaknesses and to analyzing Israel and how Israel will react upon this moment of a new discourse, a new generation, and new anger on the ground. The strength is the youth are not just carrying this new old paradigm as an imagination, they are acting on the ground. We saw Habbat Ayyad, we saw Sheikh Jarrah, we saw them in Silwan, we saw them in Naqab. Naqab, the Negev, South Palestine. I hear the youth I didn't witness before, even in the demonstration of Bavar demonstration 10 years ago against the confiscation of the land of the Negev. I didn't witness such an anger within the youth and such a willingness to connect between their daily suffering, the micro daily suffering, and the macro Palestinian vision and cause. And now you can realize this within the youth, even in the Negev, who are living without a minimal conditions of proper condition of life. You can feel the challenge, you can feel their willingness to pay the price. Israel has arrested and persecuted hundreds, has arrested more than 200. They knew that Israel will do so, but Israel didn't give us a chance. There is no alternative. And this is what was good in the deal of the century / Israel as the law of Israel as a state, a nation state for Jewish people. That Israel has stopped its pretensions that it wanted peace, that it is serious about two states, that it is serious about democracy. So these illusions that you can in some way bargain with Israel, this illusion has been has lost their logic, has lost their validity. Okay. I said that still missing that we are in a middle of liberation process, but not in a middle of rebuilding our liberation project, because there is no internal national Palestinian dialogue. There is a schizophrenia. There is no one platform, even for the youth and for people who supported, and I would say a lot of people are abandoning the old paradigm of a new state, but there is no organization or platform, not in order to develop our liberation project, not even less than that, in order to develop and promote a Palestinian national dialogue. And this issue of that we are not unified, it is not clear, the vision, what the meaning of decolonization, what the meaning of liberation, it is not so clear. And you can realize that even when we say rebuilding the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which is a slogan now, which is a brand, a very, everyone agreed to rebuild the Palestinian Liberation Organization. You can participate in tens of Zoom every week under this title, rebuilding the Palestinian Liberation Organization. But the youth generation said there is no meaning to rebuild the Palestinian Liberation Organization. We must re-establish our own organization. So even with this very important issue, there is no agreement. So it is a confusing, but this is good. It is good that we are now, the old paradigm has been collapsed, and the new generation has the power, and the power of the Palestinian imagination, which say there is no way, we are one people, one cause, and one people, one cause, and one land, and this is the path. This is the path for the future. Israel, since the Second Intifada, has been shifting towards the right wing. If in 2003, the statistics indicate that 3% of the elite within the army were from settlers. Settlers has occupied 3% from the يعني المناصب العليا في الجيش. The high position in the army. Now the settlers occupy more than 30%. Settlers and right wing compromise more than 30% of the generals, the elite position, decision makers within the Israeli army. The Palestinian issue is no longer occupying the Israeli mind. It is not on the agenda. Till 2010, you can realize that the most important issue within the Israeli election campaign was the Palestinian. Two state, one state, what to do with the Palestinians. We stopped to be part of the of the election campaign. We stopped to be part of the Israeli agenda. It is doing them. Israel didn't pay the price of the Palestinian cause since 2008, since the siege, the wall, and the coordination with the Palestinian security. These three strategic tools of controlling the Palestinians and of crisis management, not crisis solution. The Palestinian issue stopped to be an issue within the Israeli minds. It is not not just a physical segregation. is not the wall. There is a psychological wall within the Israeli mind. They don't think about the Palestinians. They don't. I think they forget that there is a Palestinian people that they occupy. It is not a problem that they occupy the Palestinians because there is a normalization with the Emirates. So the Palestinian issue lost its strategic importance during the last 10, and especially since, not since the deal of the century. The deal of the century was the result of that the Palestinian cause lost its strategic, and part of redefining the Palestinian cause as a liberation cause and part of redefining Israel as a colonialist regime, a colonialist project. This is also our way to rebuild the strategic, or it is a result. One of the results of this is to rebuild the strategic importance of the Palestinian issue. Now the Israeli, and it is, I think you heard it tens of times, the Israeli society became more fascist, more right-wing. I don't have time to give you a statistics. Now Israel, even there is a new definition of Zionism, a new definition of what it is, what the meaning of being a patriot, being an Israeli patriot. Before 10 years, you must be liberal also. There were a liberal dimension within the definition of Zionism. To be an Israeli means also to be a democratic. Now it is not. Now the settlement is on the heart of the Israeli consensus. And when we say that the Israeli occupation, the Israeli settlement project has succeeded, we don't mean that it has been expanded, the settlements has been expanded 3 times, the settlers has been increased 4 times or 3.5 times since Oslo. No. We mean that the settlements became part of the consensus and became on the core definition of what is important for Israel. Now, Al-Khalil, Hebron, is more important than Safad in 48. Now, the center, the psychological center, the sentimental, emotional center of Israel is not Tel Aviv and Haifa and 48. Now it is the 67. So Israel is changing. We cannot just continue to talk about Israel as if it is a static state of a static, and it is developing. It is now more fascist, and Israel is more sophisticated in a way that, of course, no one, even there is no left in Israel. So it's better to call them non-right. I don't know. Those who historically believed in 2 states, it is not part of the agenda. It is since Barak, Second Intifada, when Barak says no partner for peace. Now everyone thinks there is no partner for peace. It is the debate in Israel has shifted from 2 states or 1 state to another question: apartheid or not apartheid. Till 2010, this was the debate: 2 states or not. Now apartheid or not. Now it is a totally different discourse. It is I can tell the difference between the Knesset 2016, 17, 18 and the Knesset 2010 and 11 and 12. There is a difference. So now the question of apartheid, are we becoming apartheid or not? It is normal. It is a discourse. No, we don't want to be an apartheid. It's like we say, no, we want, I don't know. And the reaction, now Israel is not occupied with the Palestinian issue in 67. And there is a new expression, of course, Salam al-Iqtisadi, the economic peace, and another expression, Taqlis al-Sira, to restrict the struggle, meaning to give sovereignty to the people, but not to the land, and a lot of creative solution how to manage the Palestinians. Now, this is a question, how to manage the apartheid? Not how to make peace, or whether even to make peace, how to manage this burden of Palestinians. Okay, we'll take the land, it is no question. We want sovereignty in Zone C, but how to make it? And now it is more accepted within the Israeli society to talk more about the sovereignty on the land. It is an Israeli sovereignty. The land will be under an Israeli sovereignty, but the people, we will give them autonomy. It is not totally a new solution, but within a new expressions. And the same is how Israel is thinking about the Palestinians in 48. In the Palestinian in 48, it is now we also there is also Israeli strategies to deal with the Palestinians in 48. More persecution, more police measurement, more persecution of parties. Israel has declared the Islamic movement Northern branch as outside the law. Persecution of my party, التجمع, persecution of the youth. They entered last week. They entered persecuted the women, the youth women. They entered their houses. They throw tear gas in their houses. They are calling them, and they are losing. They are Asabat losing even. And excuse me for my language now. I will tell you what young women who demonstrated and participated said to me. They received a telephone from a police, seems saying, "We'll fuck you. We will persecute you and fuck you." So there is no limits now. Of course, it is part also. You heard about criminalizing the Palestinian NGOs. Preventing Israeli NGOs from entering the schools, censorship within the universities, the Israeli university. So it is a very clear expression of fascism, of fascist policies, fascist persecution, but at the same time, more ihtiwa, more to develop a middle class Palestinians who, how the carrot and the stick, how to persecute the activists, and how to emerge the middle class, the section of the Palestinians who are worried about their own career development, who have more individualistic division toward their lives, who doesn't care really about national movement or national liberation. And you could realize within a year, the May the Intifada of May 2021, that even administration in the hospitals has forced Arab Palestinian doctors and nurses to go to make pictures and to hold the slides with their colleagues, Jewish colleagues, to hold the slides that we refuse violence, we want Dukiyum, we want Ta'ayush, we want a coexistence. They forced the Arab dictators, taking into consideration that Arab dictators and nurses are 30%, the percentage of Palestinian dictators and nurses within the health system is 30%. Now, for the Palestinian 48, I will talk 5 minutes, just concentrated on 48. I would say that we should look at understand our political performance within Israel as a development, a historical development, which starts, let's say, starts in 1948. The Palestinians 48 was not officially part of any uniform Palestinian struggle since 48. Israel has declared a military regime on the Palestinians for regime. There was no state. So 20 years from 1948 for 20 almost, we were still a name of the game just to survive. 70s, we started to develop a more national and collective national discourse. It was Land Day in the mid of the 70s.
Haneen, can you hear us?
What happened?
We lost your video and your sound. You were talking about the National Day, the Land National Day Yom al-Ard. So I suggest that you put your camera off, so maybe we can hear you better. And because I think the connection from the source is not great.
My connection, so
so maybe just put the camera off and we can hear you for this part of the presentation. We'll try that.
And I mean, you have about 5 more minutes, okay?
Oh, for 4 minutes, I will hurry. Okay. So I will skip the historical analysis. I will go to this moment. So the July 2018 was a historical moment with this law of Israel as a nation, as a state for a nation state. I forgot always, it's confusing. A nation state, Jewish nation state law. Okay, so for us, this was a very important historical moment for 48. We had 2 possibilities or 3 possibilities to react. Either to say, okay, now it's clear we are in front of a colonialist state. We should also redefine the game. If Israel is so honest, has this confidence to be so honest to say, I am a colonialist regime, you have nothing you have no rights here. So we'll say, okay, you are a colonialist, and there is no way except to redefine ourselves as part of the Palestinian people, to say we must decolonize, deconstruct with which state. This would be one option. The other option would be to ignore all traditional political discrimination, more rights here and there, more civic rights, even to ignore our national level, macro national level, and to concentrate on our civic rights. This was second. The third option, which no one has imagined, was to be part of a government, of settler government, and if you ask me, I would, till now I cannot believe, I cannot absorb, I cannot really understand what happened with us, and this is why I felt so disconnected with reality. I was me, and this is very hard to say it, as a Knesset member for 10 years, as a politician, as a political leader, within a very recognized political and very prestigious and well-known political party, the National Democratic Assembly. No one can that the Muslim, the Islamic, so pragmatic, even though so pragmatic, but the Muslim movement or any Arab Palestinian party would say, okay, one way of dealing with this racism, fascism, with this very hard situation is to be part of it, to be part of the colonial system, to play with this, within the same game. And this was, we are in a, this is why I can call it a schizophrenic situation, because part of us is with the government, part of us coordinating the Palestinian Authority, coordinating just Jawasis. They are just persecuting Palestinian activists. They are giving information about them to the Israeli security. And here we in 48, we are part of the government. And this is and at the other end, we are talking about liberation and about decolonization and about deconstructing Zionism and about one nation, one Palestinian cause. It's the same people who are which lost its connection with reality, and this is the obstacle. We cannot fight against the Zionism with this political elite. We cannot. This is the obstacle. It is not Israel. It is not Israel. Israel. It is the so obvious function of the occupier, of the colonizer, to oppress you. To oppress you. This is his, by definition, this is his role. But the problem, the first and main obstacle is political leadership, which is oppressing its own people. Yani, I cannot understand how my party, political Palestinian parties, has recommended Gantz to be the head of the Israeli government 2 years ago. And I couldn't believe this. So what makes our struggle more difficult, although we are willing to pay the price, thousands of Palestinians went onto the street, a generation whom you thought are connected just to TikTok and just to, I don't know, individualistic ambitions, has proved that we didn't understand this generation, and the generation, then not all. This is not. It is an exaggeration in the description. Not all of them, but there is a willingness, and again, Negev, Sheikh Jarrah, and May 2012. Now, my last 3 minutes. What is ahead? Okay, what's our main challenging now? I would say our main challenge is to make our vision more clear. Okay, there is no hope that the old elite will reconsider their way. I don't think there is no hope that the Palestinian parties represented in the Knesset will reconsider. How those time as a liberation cause, how we can unify ourselves or even create the minimum platform of national dialogue between us, and to clarify the vision, to make our vision a little bit more clear, what we mean by liberation, again, what we mean by decolonization. And I believe that there is a strategic power within citizenship. As citizens, and even the young generation will disagree with me, there is a strategic power for us as a citizen to say that we are living within a colonial citizenship, and we want to suggest another deconstructive way of citizenship, which means full equality, full democracy, which is challenging Zionism. This should be now, I think this is the way, this is a way ahead to clarify this vision. And the second, not to be occupied with this question, 2 state, 1 state, this is not the question. The question is not about the final arrangement, the final, not final, okay, the solution. I think this is it's wasting of time. It's a waste of time to think about what is the solution. We should talk about the crimes now Israel is conducting against our people. The Negev, Sheikh Jarrah, Jerusalem. Okay, we don't know what's the vision. We know the values of this vision. We know that the pillars of this vision. The pillars of this vision is justice, right of return, decolonization, challenging the Zionists. This is the pillars of the vision. We don't know what is the solution. And it is not the time to really define the solution, the arrangement, and what is the features of this one state or whatever. But Israel is now should lose its legitimacy as and we should hold Israel accountable to its crimes now, because Israel now is making irreversible, irreversible changes in Jerusalem, even in the Negev. And besides those people who went on the street without knowing exactly what is the final vision, what is the exact vision. We don't need, in order to struggle, we don't need really to know what kind of one state or what kind of regime we should struggle for. We can struggle with this vague vision, and this is what is important now, our struggle on the ground. And this is the solidarity we need from international organization. So I will finish by 2 sentences. We should deconstruct the Palestinian narrative, concentrating on justice, equality, right of return, decolonization, and making Israel, Article 2, making Israel accountable to its crimes. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much, Haneen, for this comprehensive approach to what's going on the ground and the challenges that are facing Palestinians inside Israel, Palestinians in occupied territories. And I invite you to open your camera now so we can have kind of like a more humane debate, even that hopefully we aim for a better connection. I was fascinated by your courage actually to adopt this non-orthodox approach to the struggle and to the challenges, because many people are kind of like, many people avoid addressing and acknowledging those challenges that are facing the Palestinian liberation movement and the new generation and the division in leadership and the lack of connection between the vision about Palestinian liberation movement with the leadership and the new generation. But let me start by asking you a question about the tools that this youth movement on the ground that you talked about with lots of kind of like enthusiasm, and actually you presented them as the hope for a change in the trajectory of the Palestinian struggle. But within the whole uncertainty, inequality, and the extreme shift to the right on the Israeli side, what tools such generation had on the ground, and what is required? Again, I would like you to elaborate more on the role of international solidarity here, as you ended your talk with referring to solidarity and the need for solidarity. Where is the role of solidarity here to support such a new trajectory on the Palestinian struggle and support the youth movement on the ground?
Okay. When we are talking about the youth, I can differentiate between two realities of this youth. You have the youth who are suffering from poverty, from lack of opportunities, within 48 also, lack of hope, there is no way for the future. So they are willing to go to the streets, not thinking about without a clear vision. In order to, if you are angry from your reality, you don't need clarity. You are angry. You have nothing to lose. And in the Negev, when you will lose your home, your land, you don't have electricity, you don't have water. So they have the courage to go out, and they don't count the tool, not to count about إنه يعتمد على, to count إيش بيقولوا يعتمد على, to count about, count on, but not to count on the traditional political elite. They lost the connection. If you ask me what's good, they lost their connection to the traditional political elite, and this is good. And this is good. When I meet the youth in the demonstration saying, we don't count on you again. We don't want to hear you. We don't want even to see you. We will have our own way. What's your own way? They don't know. But to go on the street, this is part of the way. To express their anger, it is part of the way. To pay the price, they know that the police will persecute them because they saw the police in Second Intifada. They saw it in Sheikh Jarrah. They saw it in May 2021. They know that the police will persecute them, will run after them, will follow them, will investigate them, will threat them. They know it. But you don't have, the tool, what? Despair? Despair is a tool.
Despair.
Despair is a tool.
Yeah, but a follow-up question on this, and it's very important. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
And the second category, a more politicized youth who are more active in NGOs, in grassroots. This is the tool. They are organized within grassroots. A lot of unified a way of working between the youth organization in the diaspora in 48 and inside 67. They are unified. They talk together. They think together. They think about how to organize a simultaneous demonstration in Haifa, in Gaza, in Ramallah, and in Berlin, and international thinking. And they are well connected as grassroots, well educated. They master the discourse, how to make a dialogue, develop a dialogue with the Western mentality, a Western community, well connected internationally. And they open their imagination, to open our imagination, not to feel any commitment, not to Oslo, not to political elite and to Israel, and even not to citizenship. I am more occupied, and this is my sentence, I am more occupied with how to deal with citizenship as a strategic tool than them. They disagree with me. They say, not to talk about citizenship. It is not the time. It's liberation, not citizenship. I'm old-fashioned, maybe. I think how citizenship I use citizenship in order to liberate us and to unify us. They said I am wrong. They disagree with me. They said, no, citizenship, thinking about citizenship is also a colonialist way of thinking. So I have something to learn.
That we are all learning, actually, and I think as a scholar on those kind of like alternatives to citizenship, I still believe that your approach to citizenship with regards to citizenship as an action is fascinating. But at the same time, a follow-up on this question is, it's great that they are kind of like disconnecting themselves from the old paradigm, and they realize how the old paradigm is kind of like obscuring their movement towards new forms of liberation. But how can they keep a momentum in the face of such a state, such institution, even in West Bank, in the territories under the PA authority? They are also facing other human rights abuses conducted by the PA itself, right? So how can they maintain the momentum to achieve something and not to lose the momentum? For example, we watch a lot of changes after May 15th, 2021 at the global level, but many people talked about losing the momentum because there is no clear vision. So I would like to hear from you, and I would like you to elaborate more on this very important and significant point about keeping the momentum for the new paradigm.
I will be so honest and disappoint you. I will join your question. I will not answer your question. No one can answer your question. This is the question also of this generation. Mm-hmm. No. This is a question of all of us. There is no answers. And I don't believe I believe that the struggle on the ground will give us the answer. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I was surprised. I was surprised by the youth going out in May. I was surprised going to the demonstration in Nazareth in May 21 and see 1,000, not tens, which I used to see during the last 6, 7 years. I don't know, and they are not just me. The youth I speak with and are
Connection is not great.
also asking the same question. We don't know. And in organization, they don't believe in leadership. They represent a different thinking, different than me. I feel myself so old, so old when I speak with them. They don't believe in leadership. I believe in leadership. I believe in organization. I believe in an organized way. They don't, and they don't have the worry I have and the worry your question has expressed. Will you lose a momentum? They said they are not worried. I participated in a Zoom before 1 week. They said, this is the answer I got. There is no way back. There is no.
Yeah. I'll wait for Haneen to complete her answer.
It's a determination. They don't feel that they need to analyze objective. I don't hear you. I lost your voice.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. Yeah. This is fascinating, and we would love to hear more actually on what's going on the ground, because for us, this is the only chance for us to know what is going on the ground, given what the mainstream media is trying to cover in their own way, and not kind of like put the light on such movements that are really bringing a change in the Palestinian struggle. And it's only through people like you that we are able to hear about this. But at the same time, we would like to hear more from you on the division in the Palestinian political movements. You talked about the division you are witnessing inside Israel between the Islamic movement, who agreed on the third option, and the old kind of like traditional elite who wanted to maintain either option 1 or 2. But this is one layer of division. We have also the division between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, for example, in occupied territories. We would like to hear from you more on how such divisions, multi-layer divisions, let me put it that way, affecting also the Palestinian struggle, and where can we see the light?
Okay, I would not describe it as a multi-layer divisions. I think division between Fatah and Hamas is part of history, not because it has been solved, because it's irrelevant to the new paradigm of decolonization. For me, it's irrelevant. For me, I am not waiting for unification between Fatah and Hamas. For me, the only relevant division, this is relevant, I can explain reality by one main division. Old paradigm of diplomacy, two-state, discrimination inside Israel, division of Palestinian communities, each community has its own struggle and own benefit, and the new, very old, this is the old of the 70s and 60s paradigm of liberating Palestine. Mm-hmm. For me, Fatah and Hamas is part of old history. They should be part of old history. They should be part of the only strategic division. I think we should differentiate between divisions which has political importance, I don't deny, but strategic divisions. The strategic division now, which will write the history now of the Palestinian, is between these two paradigms. الباقي تفاصيل, the remains are details of history. They are on the margins of the political scene.
Yeah.
But I said that we cannot struggle for the new paradigm unless we struggle for the old elites, and Hamas and Fatah. No, I cannot compare between the two. The PA is an obstacle. Zeus and also Hamas, in a way that it tries to empower itself as an organization without also empowering the people. They are an obstacle for this new paradigm. Also, Hamas didn't believe in decolonization and liberation, and of course not in equality and right for women, because I don't want to liberate Palestinian and oppress the woman. I don't want a state, an oppressive state. I want liberation. For me, liberation is also on individualistic level and also on the collective level. I want justice for all. I want justice for the individuals. For me, the liberation and the liberty of the individual is so important. But to answer your question in a very focused way, I think the most strategic relevant division now is between these two paradigms, and this division is going across all the geographies of Palestinians. Yani, you will find these two paradigms in 48, you will find these two paradigms in 67. It is not that the division, the political division following a geographical division. No, it is not that the 48 has its own way, 67, yeah. No. Now you will find pro-Oslo against Oslo in 48, and those who are pro-Oslo is the old political elite, and pro-Oslo and against Oslo, pro and supporters for the two paradigms. You will find them across all the Palestinian geographies. Regarding the third option, it was not an option really. Mansour Abbas, we don't consider him. I said analytically it's an option, but politically هو خاين.
Yeah.
But شو خاين?
Betrayal.
Yeah. It's to be part of an Israeli settlement government, to be part of the government. It is not an option. He has broken, and I didn't enter into details, he has broken all the minimal consensus within the Palestinian. He has shifted towards the light, breaking all the political concept which constitute the political scene of the Palestinians within 48.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I will stop asking my questions that I wanted you to actually to use them to give you the chance to elaborate on certain and significant point, and I will ask Bob now to ask our audience questions just for the sake of time. Bob, the floor is yours. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Some of the questions were answered in the discussions that Haneen, you just had. One that has come in a couple of times is, in different formats, what can be done to encourage the international community to hold Israel accountable for its violations of international law and crimes against humanity?
Okay. How we can encourage the international solidarity? Once I saying this law, Israel as a Jewish national state to all the languages and make sure that parliamentarians and focus on this law and stop analyzing Israel. To let Israel talk about itself. Stop explaining what is Israel doing. And there is this law. Of course, there is the crimes on Jerusalem, etc., etc. But maybe concentrating more, not on the crimes in the West Bank and Gaza, but on the good Israel. On what Israel, because people is differentiating between the bad Israel in the occupied territories and the good Israel in 48. This is a basic law. This is the Israeli constitution. Israel has no constitution. This is the most important law. And it is a very clear colonial law with very clear articles. Article 7 speaking about it is the role of the state to encourage building settlements for Jewish. Article 7 talking explicitly about apartheid settlements. So just to have this, to focus attention on this law. This is the constitution of Israel. This is not what the army is killing Palestinians in the West Bank because Israel is defending itself. Okay, this discourse of defending itself. This is a law which has nothing to do with defense. This is the optimal perception of Israel about itself. This is the ambitious, it is the maximum, the most optimistic realization of Israel about itself, the law. So I think I can still I still want to encourage this way of talking more about Israel itself in the 48, talking about the DNA of the state, not the policies, not the performance of the army, not and Israel is so confused with this. This is why Israel declared my party in 2003, 2005, 2008 as a strategic challenge, because we didn't throw stones, not because we throw stones, not because we are terrorists, because we said the state, we don't give legitimacy to the state should be a state for all the citizens, and this is a strategic threat. So I think to concentrate about the dynamics between the political performance and the political struggle of the Palestinians inside Israel and the Israeli regime itself. And to make it clear, Israel is not afraid from the Palestinians, not from Hamas. Israel is afraid from democracy. Israel is afraid from democracy. And this is what the law, this constitutional law, this basic law is saying. We consider democracy to be a threat. So the problem of Israel, not the Palestinians. The problem of Israel is a standard way of life, basic rights, basic equality, and basic values of democracy. I think this is important. Second of all, I don't know, but really to speak against the two-state solution. To say now, anyone who is talking about two-state solution is supporting Israel. Even if Israel doesn't want this discourse also, doesn't like this discourse. But not to push Palestinians to go to the negotiation, because it is Israel doesn't want a peace. A negotiation is not a process to create more illusions, to win more time, to deepen, to expand settlements. and to expand the Israeli oppression. To say that those who, as Belgium, before a few days said that she want to encourage the two sides and to organize a negotiation now to continue the negotiation between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Israel doesn't want, also the Palestinians doesn't want, because also to evacuate the Palestinians from Sheikh Jarrah and to destroy the houses and to talk about peace is a crime. It is a crime. You are talking about peace and about sitting together while you are destroying my life and destroying my house. So to concentrate, I cannot elaborate more on how. I think the organization themselves should, I cannot tell how the international organization must concentrate upon what's going in Sheikh Jarrah, to come to visit Israel. Why I was wondering during the last 4 or 5 years, all those whom Israel preventing, the foreigners, the activists whom Israel preventing from entering Israel, why you don't make this on the heart of the agenda, on the heart of the debate, of international debate with your parliamentarians, with your government? Israel is preventing activists from France, from America, from Canada, from Britain, from Italy, from Germany, from entering from entering Palestine. I would tell you what helping Palestinians, these activists who accompany the Palestinians, who are living with the Palestinians, to help them to harvest their farms, to help them with zaytun, olive oils. They are doing a great job, but there are few of them. And there is, it is not just Israel vis-a-vis the Palestinians, it's Israel vis-a-vis the Western community, the whole world. Now Israel is a dangerous also for, Israel is interfering in the internal issues in Britain with Jeremy Corbyn, in shutting censorship with this new definition of anti-Semitism. I think this is this is a treasure to use, the new definition of anti-Semitism. This is declaring a war. Israel is declaring a war on the Western and the international community, not just on the Palestinians. Israel is dangerous for the freedom of expression inside Europe, inside Canada, inside the USA. And I think to internalize, to make the Zionism also the enemy of freedom within the Western community is a good strategy.
Thank you.
Okay.
I see we are running out of time. And I want to thank you so much for this. This was so informative. It was enraging, but extremely informative and extremely important. And I'd like to turn time over to myself for some closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Bob, and thank you very much, Haneen. Like, I don't think I have anything to add, because in your last comments about the solidarity and what is needed at the international level, I think you nailed it. Israel is now a threat to the global justice, and you put it in a clear and kind of like straightforward. No, there's no doubt about it. So I think everybody now has a vision about what is needed from us as individuals at the international level, and what is needed from us as individuals who have the privilege actually to use certain tools of democracy in our societies in order to show support to the new paradigm that is existing and emerging in the Palestinian struggle. And again, we are so much occupied sometimes with those questions about 2 states, 1 state. I think it's over. You made it very clear. We shouldn't waste more time on these questions. The vision is very clear. What we need is to challenge the colonial nature of the state of Israel and we should actually find ways in talking and creating dialogue channels with the people on the streets, with the people who are now waiting for us to support them in creating this new landscape for the struggle. So thank you very much, Haneen, for your time. We really appreciate all these ideas and the perspective you brought to us and our audience. And at the same time, I would like to remind our audience of what Bob mentioned at the beginning. If you find this webinar informative, we need your support in contributing financial contributions to CVPR to make these webinars always possible to achieve. You had the link, you have our email. Please write to us. Either you send an e-transfer or write to us and we can provide you with other methods. Thank you very much for your time. And again, we would like to have you with us again and again to provide us with such amazing and inspiring and a great way of bringing hope and frustration together that challenge us as people with privilege here. Thank you and have a great weekend.
Everyone. Thank you. Shukran.
Shukran, Haneen. Shukran.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.